Hello, everybody. Always doing that, aren't I? I forget I'm playing and forget it's time to read the story. And today's story is the story of Mr. Fussy. Now, Mr. Fussy he's like a sort of long, dark green sausage with a little round yellow nose, brown shoes, but most obviously he's got sort of stringy hair just brushed from either side, and he's got a little moustache under his nose. So there you can see that is Mr. Fussy. So we'll see what his story is all about. He probably likes everything to be just so, everything in the right place. Shall we see? So, Mr. Fussy was fussy about everything. Absolutely everything had to be neat and tidy and in its proper place. Mr. Fussy spent all day and every day rearranging his furniture and making sure the flowers grew in a straight line in his garden and trying to find specks of dust where there couldn't possibly be specks of dust, because he spent all his time dusting to make sure there weren't any specks of dust. And there you can see in his garden everything really straight and very, very tidy. I'm now feeling a bit boring for me, but some people like it very straight and tidy. One fine morning, Mr. Fussy was having breakfast. He was very fussy about what he ate. He opened the marmalade pot. He exclaimed, "It's got bits in it!" And he spent the rest of the morning separating the bits from the marmalade. Or if you prefer it, the marmalade from the bits. Because some marmalade has chunks in it, doesn't it? It has bits of peel, which I like, and a lot of people do like. It makes it taste stronger, I think. Fussy old fusspot, people used to call him. Then Mr. Fussy went out into his garden and spent the rest of the day straightening all the blades of grass on his lawn. So look, each blade of grass in the lawn is super straight. Fussy old fusspot. Now, that evening, Mr. Fussy was in his kitchen. He was ironing his shoelaces. I have never, ever heard of anybody ironing their shoelaces, when he heard a crash outside. "What's to do?" he murmured to himself, and hurried outside to investigate. And there, with a broken garden gate in one hand, an old battered suitcase in the other, and a sheepish grin on his face, stood an untidy person. It was Mr. Clumsy, who looks very like Mr. Fussy, doesn't he? Same colour shoes, look, same colour, same red yellow nose, and his hair looks like Mr. Fussy, but very, very untidy. "Oops," he said, holding up the garden gate. "It came off in my hand." "Who?" spluttered Mr. Fussy, looking in horror at his garden gate. "Are you?" "I'm Mr. Clumsy," replied the untidy person, grinning. He stepped forward to shake Mr. Fussy's hand, and you know what he did, didn't he? He tripped over and fell on the lawn. All those blades of grass that were nice and straight. "My grass!" cried Mr. Fussy. "My straight grass! You've bent it!" And he got down on his hands and knees and started straightening the grass. "But who are you?" he asked over his shoulder, "and why are you here?" "I'm your cousin," replied Mr. Clumsy, "your long-lost cousin from Australia. I've come to visit." And when you see them there, look, you can see just how similar they are. Now, you might be saying, if he's come from Australia, should he not have an Australian accent? But maybe he used to live in England, he's then lived in Australia, so he'd have an English accent, wouldn't he? "Aren't you pleased to see me?" continued Mr. Clumsy cheerfully, knocking over a flower or two as he got up, and picked up his suitcase, knocking over another flower or two or three. Mr. Fussy, quite obviously, was not pleased to see him. "You better come in," he muttered. "I say," remarked Mr. Clumsy, looking through the front door. Mr. Fussy says, "I say, what a neat little place you've got here." And he stepped inside. Guess what? He tripped over his shoelaces, as he often does, and knocked over a chair, and dropped his suitcase, and fell in an untidy heap on the floor. "Whoops," he said. And Mr. Fussy shut his eyes and heaved a sigh and groaned silently to himself. Later that evening, after Mr Fussy had cooked them a meal, and after Mr Clumsy had helped with the washing up, 2 broken plates, they sat down to talk. Mr Fussy sat, as he always did, in a neat, tidy fashion. Mr Clumsy sat, as he always did, in a not very neat and not very tidy fashion. "How long are you staying?" asked Mr Fussy. "Oh, I don't know," grinned Mr Clumsy. "A few days, week, a year, I haven't decided." When he woke in the morning... Oh no, this is not good. When he awoke in the morning, Mr Fussy jumped out of bed and went into his bathroom. "Oh no," he gasped, "oh no." Oh yes, Mr Clumsy had been there before him. The towels lay in a heap on the floor. The bath was full of water. There were pools of water all over the bathroom floor, and half a tube of toothpaste. What a mess. Mr Fussy made it all as neat and tidy as quickly as he could, and then Mr Fussy hurried downstairs. "Morning," said his cousin cheerfully. "I've cooked your breakfast. Sit down." There was an awful mess everywhere. "There we are," said Mr Clumsy, carrying a plate of fried eggs. Broken fried eggs. Well, you knew that, didn't you? Towards the table. "Breakfast." And then, you guessed it, he tripped over those shoelaces of his, and then the eggs flew through the air, and they landed. Where do you think they landed? They landed on the top of Mr Fussy's head. Sticky, greasy, yellow fried eggs. "Whoops," said Mr Clumsy. After a week, Mr Fussy's house didn't look like Mr Fussy's house anymore at all. Can you see? Look, there's broken windows everywhere. All the flowers have fallen over. The trees are broken. The door's broken. Oh, what a mess. But perhaps fortunately, after 2 weeks, Mr Clumsy decided to move on. "Thank you for having me," he said to Mr Fussy. "It was very nice to see you," replied Mr Fussy politely, but what he was thinking was, "Very nice to see you going." "Cheerio," said Mr Clumsy, and off he went with his battered old suitcase. "Goodbye," called Mr Fussy, really meaning good riddance. Then Mr Fussy fussed around his house as he had never fussed before. Fussy old fusspot, polishing and mending and repairing and straightening and sorting out and cleaning and putting everything back exactly as it had been before Mr Clumsy came to stay. He even dusted the flowers in the garden. That evening, Mr Fussy was in his kitchen polishing an egg when he heard a crash outside. "Oh no," he groaned, "not Mr Clumsy back again. It can't be, it mustn't be. Oh, it isn't." It wasn't. It was somebody else. Somebody who had just walked straight through Mr Fussy's garden gate. Somebody who can't help having little accents. Somebody you may have met before. "Hello," smiled Mr Bump. "I've come to visit." Or Mr Bump breaks even more things than Mr Clumsy, I think you will remember. So that's good. I think there's probably room for everybody, isn't there? But what's nice is if we're perhaps not entirely Mr Clumsy and we're not entirely Mr Fussy, but maybe we can all be a little bit of both. I hope you enjoyed that story. Don't go breaking too many things. Don't go being too fussy. Be happy. Bye now.